So today I'm going to talk about an imprint. Now I'm a huge record fan, music fan, as the T-shirt attests to. But I never bought records by their label. I know a lot of people do, but to me, it was always the artists and the individual records. And I'm sort of similar with books, except I make or have made this year an exception for the Fitzcarraldo imprint. Now, I don't know if it's named after or inspired by the film Fitzcarraldo, which is basically about the impossible task of transporting a boat overland in the Amazon, which is, this sort of impossible feat. But anyway, the first thing you notice is plain covers, all the same, blue calligraphy, and the calligraphy is all the same and all of that, which I like. It's basically saying this is literature, no frills about the stuff around it. It's what's inside, and I kind of like that. And I started off reading this one called Zone by Matthias Ensard. Now, last year I used the Goodreads function of if you like this book, you might like that. And what it led to was a series of very, very big, thick books in the sort of, I hesitate to use the word experimental, postmodern, avant-garde, that sort of realm. And I think I read about six or seven, and they were all 500, 600, 700 pages. It was quite a tough year for reading in that you didn't have that sense of, I've read loads of books this year. Well, I hadn't, because I had so many of these big ones. And this was the last one of them, and I don't know why it kept slipping to the bottom of the pile, but it did. And I got through them all, and this was the last one. And for some reason, it was the turn of the year. It was either Christmas time when I was at home, I started reading it, or it's the turn of the year, I can't remember which. And it blew me away. It's called Zone. It's about the history of war and conflict, basically, in the Mediterranean region that stretches from Europe to Turkey, down to North Africa. And it's all written in one sentence, the whole 500, 600 pages, whatever it is, 500 pages. It's one sentence long. I think to suggest the remorselessness and the relentlessness of the conflict in the region. But don't be put off by that, because there is a rhythm. The writing is so beautiful. Don't forget this is in translation. The writing is so beautiful that it has a pace of itself, even though there's not the punctuation of a formal breathing space of the full stop. It's basically a guy who knows all the secrets of the region of former Yugoslavia and North Africa, Algeria, all the nasty guys involved in this, the sort of the torturers and the gun runners and all of this. He's got the gen on all of them, and he's got a suitcase full of all the information that he's built up, and he's basically going to sell it for money so he can retire. And he's travelling on a train from I can't remember where in Italy, but to Rome, and that's the destination. He's going to sell this document. And somehow the book is written so that it has the rhythm of a train travelling over the tracks, which again helps you, the reader, because there's not the punctuation you expect, but the writing has its rhythm. So it's remorseless, and yet it is paced. So it's quite an achievement, and it's a brilliant overview of just man's inhumanity to man in this region, and it's a fantastic read. So on the basis of that, I thought, right, what else is on this label? I don't know. Maybe that's the psychology of the plain thing. I actually went because at the time there was nothing else available by this guy, so I thought, well, maybe other stuff will be like, and that's what happened. So Bricks and Mortar by Clemens Meyer is a German writer who was writing about the fall of the Berlin Wall from the East perspective, in that it ushered in all sorts of sort of capitalist opportunities, including prostitution, which was much more limited under the old East German regime, but it just absolutely blossomed under once the wall had come down. It's because it's a load of different voices. Some chapters are more interesting than others, obviously, and I tended to find that the female prostitutes and madams voices were more interesting than the male pimps and sort of entrepreneurs. But there's some very, very good writing in that. Then there's the Vasila Dream which is written by a Spaniard called Augustin Fernandez Malo, but is actually set in America. And it is sort of quite dreamlike, sort of modern. It's quite a postmodern book, but about modern America and, sort of the inputs of media and advertising, and then it's basically sort of an impressionistic work of America as seen by a Spaniard. And I think there's a sort of sequel, maybe even a third part to this. It's one of those books where you just sort of lay back and luxuriate in and just let it sort of wash over you, and whatever sort of sediment of description or metaphor sort of clings to you is the value of the book. So I enjoyed it. And then this one called The Doll's Alphabet is a short stories. Camilla Grudova, I can't remember where she's from. She lives in Toronto. Is she actually Canadian? I don't know. But anyway, there's some really strong writing in this, all from the female perspective. But there's a couple of real stories that stop you up short, and it's great. And I have now finally got Matthias Ensard's next book, which is called Compass. It's in my to be read pile. I haven't read it yet. And just the whole thing made me think of. I said in a earlier edition about the edition on Binet's The Seventh Functional Language, that British novel writing has rather ceded the ground of its sort of primacy in post-war Europe. And there's always been a European sensibility which has been different to a British sensibility in novel writing. And what I like about this series is you get a very good sense of European writing, European fiction, even though she might be Canadian or whatever, but it has a European sensibility to it, which is different somehow to the British sensibility. I'm not sure I can put my finger on it. Britain is always, British writers write about Britain as a small island, and there's that sort of small focus, whereas Europeans write on a continental level, the continent of Europe, even if they're writing about their own country. So, I mean, Ensard obviously is writing about the continent of Europe and sort of North Africa. But even Bricks and Mortar, which is, ostensibly set in Germany, it has a wider feel than just, the area of around the Berlin Wall. So I really like this imprint because it gives me a taste of something that's very different to my diet of American writers and the British fiction scene, which obviously I know quite well. So highly recommended. They do also do non-fiction books. I must admit I haven't read any of them. And they've also just published their first British writer, interestingly, a book called Monsters. Can't remember the author's name. I don't know whether I'm going to track that down or not. For the simple reason, I actually submitted a manuscript to these guys, and I realised when I saw the blurb for Monsters that, unfortunately, from my point of view, part of what I was doing is covered in this book, Monsters. So I don't think they're going to want two books of similar things. So my book will not be published by Fitzcarraldo, which is a shame. Because I would dearly love a blue cover for one of my books. But I probably will end up reading Monsters. And be interested to see if that has a European sensibility or it is sort of still distinctly British. So that might be a future one. Till then.